The great lecture hall of the Galactic Academy was filled with noise. Rows of alien students from many species sat in shining seats, their strange eyes glowing under the soft lights. The walls were high and metallic, covered with glowing patterns of knowledge. This was the place where future leaders of the galaxy learned about history, politics, and war. Today, the lesson was about humanity. Most of the students did not take the subject seriously. Humanity was seen as an outdated race, a people who had survived but only by luck. In the grand halls of the galaxy, humans were known for their bans, strict laws against certain weapons, forbidden research, and limits that no other race would accept. To many young aliens, this looked like fear. To them, humanity was weak because it refused to use the full power of science. The professor, an older alien with gray ridges across his head, tapped his claw against the control desk. His voice echoed through the room. "Today's lecture," he said, "will cover the strange policies of humanity. They are the only species in the Council who placed bans on their own weapons and sciences. While others expand knowledge without limit, humans close doors. While others embrace power, humans reject it. Tell me, why would a species handicap themselves so?" Laughter filled the hall. Some students shouted answers. "Because they are afraid," one alien hissed. "Because they cannot control their toys," another said. "They are too simple to master true science," shouted a third. The professor gave a thin smile and nodded as if he agreed. Yes, many believe humanity is guided by fear. They fear what they create, they fear what they do not understand. The aliens laughed louder. One student stood and raised his hand. His eyes glowed bright blue as he sneered. "My father says humans are dangerous only in stories. Old propaganda. He says their armies are filled with chaos, not discipline. That is why they hide behind bans." The room roared with more laughter. Even the professor chuckled. But in the back row, one student stayed quiet. His skin was pale green, and his eyes were narrow, always watching. He leaned forward and whispered, so low that only those close to him could hear. "There is a reason for every ban," he said, "and when it comes to humans, the reason is never weakness." But no one listened. The laughter drowned his words. The professor raised his hand again. "Very well. Let us see if the council agrees with you. For today, they have released certain recordings. Old footage, once restricted, now shared for academic study. Watch carefully. Perhaps you will find your truth." The lights dimmed. A giant screen unfolded across the front of the hall. The alien students leaned back in their seats, some still smiling, expecting old films or false human tales. The screen flickered. At first it was only static. Then shapes appeared, shadows moving across a battlefield. The camera shook as dust rose into the sky. Strange creatures, massive and armored, marched forward. Their roars shook the air. Alien students leaned closer, curious. Then came the humans. They were smaller than their enemies, but they did not move with fear. Their armor was scarred, their weapons marked by use, but their lines were perfect. They marched in silence, and even the sound of their boots echoed with power. When they stopped, the battlefield froze. It was as if the ground itself waited for their command. The laughter in the hall stopped. The students stared as the humans raised their weapons. There were no wild screams, no chaos. Their attacks were exact, each shot finding its target. Enemies, twice their size, fell in seconds. Creatures that had terrified other races for centuries were cut down like nothing. One alien student swallowed hard. This is not fear. This is control." The professor said nothing. His hands gripped the desk tighter as the footage continued. The humans advanced, not fast, not slow, but steady, like an unstoppable wall. Their enemies tried to rush them, tried to break their lines, but the humans bent like steel, never breaking. Their faces were cold, their eyes unshaken. The quiet student in the back row whispered again, "Legends always have a seed of truth." Though why? Others glanced at him, now uneasy. On the screen, the human commander lifted his hand and in a single gesture, the battlefield turned into silence. The enemy army was gone. Only smoke and broken ground remained. The humans did not cheer. Did not celebrate. They stood still as if waiting for the next war. The professor cleared his throat. His voice was no longer mocking. This was one of the first wars where humanity placed their bans. After this, they chose to lock away certain weapons forever. The students shifted in their seats. No one laughed now. Their eyes stayed locked on the humans on the screen. The professor pressed a new control. "And now," he said, "the council has allowed us to view the next level of restricted footage. What you have seen is only the beginning. The truth of their ban lies deeper." The room grew colder. The students leaned forward, their hearts racing. The screen went black for a moment and a red warning appeared. Restricted footage, level 0. The hall was silent, and then the next image appeared. The red warning on the giant screen glowed like fire. Restricted footage, level 0. Authorized eyes only. A hush spread through the alien lecture hall. Students who had been laughing minutes earlier now sat with stiff shoulders and wide eyes. Even the professor, who had mocked humanity moments ago, lowered his gaze. His claws trembled slightly as he pressed the next command. The screen flickered, and the sound of wind echoed across the room. A new battlefield appeared. This was not the dusty skirmish they had just witnessed. This was different. The sky was torn apart with storms of light. Shattered ships burned as they fell from orbit, fire raining down on the ground below. Entire armies, thousands of alien soldiers, marched forward with heavy steps. Their armor gleamed, their weapons pulsed with strange energy, and there, standing against them, was humanity. The humans were fewer in number, but they moved with precision. No panic, no fear. Their black armor reflected the light of explosions, their faces hidden behind helmets. As the storm of enemy fire rained down, the humans spread out in perfect formation, every movement like one mind controlling many bodies. The alien students leaned forward. Their mocking smiles were gone. The footage zoomed in. A human squad crouched low as plasma fire lit the battlefield. One soldier lifted a small device, shaped like a simple rod, then slammed it into the ground. A pulse exploded outward. The alien army's weapons flickered, then died in silence. Students gasped. "That is impossible," whispered one. "No energy can be cut like that," hissed another. But the humans kept moving. With their enemies blinded, they struck fast, blades flashing with brutal speed. Entire alien squads fell without landing a single hit. The professor's voice cracked as he tried to explain. That device was later classified as forbidden. It disrupts energy fields, even biological ones. Humanity banned it themselves. A heavy silence followed his words. The aliens shifted nervously in their seats. If humans had such devices, what else had they hidden away? The screen changed again. This time, it showed orbit. Human ships hovered in the dark, their black hulls scarred but still alive. Alien fleets surrounded them, bigger, stronger, uncountable. Yet the humans did not run. One ship stood out among them. It was enormous, its surface glowing with faint blue lines. A voice came through the recording. Calm, cold, human. Engage. The ship's front opened like a mouth, and from it poured a storm of light. Not missiles, not lasers, something else. The alien students squinted, confused, until they saw what was happening. Enemy ships began to turn. At first one, then two, then dozens. They fired not at the humans, but at their own allies. The hall gasped in terror. "It's a mind weapon," whispered the quiet alien student who had warned them earlier. His voice was low, but it carried through the silence. They turned entire fleets against themselves. The professor's claws dug into the desk. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He had no explanation. On the screen, chaos filled space. Alien warships tore each other apart, while the humans held their fire, watching, waiting. They did not need to destroy the fleet. The fleet destroyed itself. Minutes passed. Only a few enemy ships remained, drifting, burning, broken. Then the human commander's voice echoed again. End it. The human ship released a single blast. The remaining fleet vanished in white fire. The silence in the hall grew heavier. Students shifted uncomfortably, some clutching their seats, others staring at the screen in disbelief. The camera zoomed back to the battlefield on the ground. Alien armies were still advancing, though fewer now. The humans stood in their lines, calm, unbroken. Then another forbidden weapon was shown. This one was simple, a device thrown like a grenade. It landed, and suddenly the ground itself began to move. The soil twisted upward, forming sharp spikes that pierced enemy soldiers in an instant. Entire waves of aliens were erased by the earth itself. A female alien student covered her mouth. That is unnatural. That is power against nature. The professor finally spoke, but his voice shook. These are the weapons humanity banned, not because they were weak, but because they were too strong, too dangerous even for humans themselves. The alien students looked at one another. Some had fear in their eyes. Some had awe. None had laughter. The footage continued. It showed a final image. Human soldiers standing over the ruins of the battlefield. Their armor was cracked, their bodies weary, but their formation was perfect, unbroken. They stood as if carved from stone. Behind them, alien corpses stretched as far as the eye could see. One human removed his helmet. His face was scarred, his eyes cold. He looked directly at the recording device. This is why we ban them, he said. His voice was quiet, steady, because we do not need them to win. But if forced, we will use them, and nothing in this galaxy will survive. The hall fell into silence. The alien students' hearts raced. The mocking words they had spoken earlier now felt like ashes in their mouths. The quiet alien student in the back leaned forward, his eyes shining. I warned you, he whispered. Human bans are not weakness. They are chains. Chains holding back something the galaxy should pray never breaks free. The screen went black, and in the silence that followed, fear began to take root. The screen stayed black for several moments after the last image. The alien students sat frozen in their seats, their bodies tense, their eyes wide. None dared to speak. The laughter and arrogance that had filled the hall earlier had completely vanished. Now, there was only silence and fear. The professor, who had mocked humanity just a short while ago, cleared his throat. His voice, usually sharp and full of authority, was now quiet. What you have seen, he said slowly, is only one reason behind humanity's bans, and it is not the most terrible. The words sent a ripple through the room. Students shifted nervously, their claws, tendrils, and wings twitching. The professor pressed another, control. The screen lit up again. This time it was not a battlefield. It was a testing chamber. Bright white walls surrounded the image. Humans in plain uniforms stood beside strange machines, each one humming with power. Their faces were calm, but their eyes carried something heavy, an awareness of what they were about to release. The first test began. A device shaped like a cube floated in the air, glowing faintly. A soldier pressed a button. The cube pulsed, in an instant the chamber twisted. The walls bent inward, the floor cracked, and objects inside the room stretched unnaturally. It was as if gravity itself had turned violent. Then, everything collapsed into a single point and vanished. The chamber was empty. The students gasped. One alien with scales along his head shook his neck in disbelief. That was a gravity collapse. Not even the council's best scientists can control that. The professor's voice was dry, almost shaking. Humanity controlled it centuries ago. They banned it not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. That device could erase entire cities in seconds. Whispers filled the room. Some students clutched their chairs. Others looked away, unable to keep watching. The footage moved to the second test. This time, the humans set up large metal targets, shaped like soldiers. A new device was activated. It emitted no light, no fire, no obvious energy. At first, the students thought it had failed. Then the targets began to move. The metal soldiers turned on each other. Their mechanical arms lifted weapons and fired, even though they had no minds. It was as if something invisible had crawled into their circuits, commanding them. One alien student whispered, "It is a control weapon." The professor nodded slowly. Not just control. Humanity built weapons that can take command of machines, ships, even nervous systems. This technology was locked away by their own laws. For if ever unleashed, no army could resist it. No fleet could stay loyal. Entire civilizations would devour themselves. The students stared, horrified. Some trembled, imagining their own ships, their own soldiers turning on them in an instant. The third test was shown. This time, humans set a device into a barren field. A sound, deep and unnatural, rolled out across the chamber. The recording shook as if the air itself was alive. The alien students groaned and clutched their ears. Even though it was only a recording, they felt its effect. On the screen, the soldiers who had been standing calmly began to stumble. Some screamed, some turned their weapons on themselves. Others attacked each other wildly. The sound had broken their minds. The quiet alien student in the back row whispered again, his voice carrying across the silence. A weapon of sound, not to kill, but to destroy sanity. Humans call it a siren device. The professor gave him a slow, grim look. Correct. Another weapon they swore never to use again. The hall was silent. The alien students were pale, their bodies trembling. They no longer mocked, no longer smiled. The truth of humanity's bans was clearer with every test shown. The footage shifted, once more. This time it showed not weapons, but words, documents. Human leaders standing before their people, declaring the bans. Their voices were strong, firm, but heavy with warning. One human commander spoke. "We ban these weapons because they are too effective. We ban them because we know their cost. We do not fear our enemies. We fear what we might become if we use them without restraint." The alien students listened in awe. These were not words of weakness, these were words of terrifying confidence. The professor closed his eyes for a moment before speaking. "You see now, children, why humans walk with such restraint. They are not weak, they are dangerous, more dangerous than any of us imagined. They banned these weapons because if they ever used them freely, the galaxy would burn." The students were quiet, processing the truth. One brave alien raised a trembling hand. "But, Professor, if they banned them, why do these records exist? Why were they ever used at all?" The professor's expression darkened. He pressed the final control. The screen turned black again. Then a new title appeared. Classified. When the ban was broken. Gasps filled the room. The professor's voice was low, almost a whisper, because there came a war where humanity had no choice. And when they unleashed their forbidden power, the galaxy learned fear. The quiet alien student leaned back in his chair, his voice steady and chilling. "This is the lesson you were too blind to see. Humans are not peaceful because they lack weapons. They are peaceful because they chained monsters inside their own hands." The lights dimmed. The hall was silent. The students leaned forward, their hearts racing, waiting for what came next. And with a single flicker, the screen began to reveal the day humanity broke its own ban. The lecture hall was silent when the new title appeared, when the ban was broken. Every alien student leaned forward in their seat. Some trembled with fear, others with fascination. Their earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by an uneasy hunger to know the truth. Even the professor stood still, his hands tight on the console, his eyes fixed on the glowing words. The screen flickered. A new battlefield came into view. This was not a small skirmish, not a border conflict. This was a war. Entire skies burned red with fire. Planets below glowed with scars where cities had been erased. Alien fleets filled the heavens, thousands of warships moving like a tide of steel. Their weapons flashed, cutting through space, striking at human defenses. And there, surrounded, stood humanity. The human fleet was outnumbered. Their ships were scarred and broken, their formations battered by endless waves. For a moment, the alien students thought perhaps this was the day the humans would fall. Perhaps the bands had made them too cautious, too slow. But then, the human commander appeared on the screen. He was calm, scarred, his uniform dark and torn. His voice was steady, cold, carrying no fear. "This is our last option. We swore never to use these again. But if we do not act now, there will be no humanity left to swear." His hand lowered. A single command was given. "Unseal the bands." The footage shook. Onboard human ships, sealed chambers unlocked. Devices once thought destroyed were lifted from their cages. Weapons, wrapped in warnings, technology hidden for centuries, now armed by human hands. The alien students leaned forward, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding. The first release came from orbit. A human ship fired a weapon that was not light, not metal, not fire. Instead, space itself bent. The enemy fleet, charging forward with confidence, suddenly twisted. Ships crashed into each other, their engines pulled into impossible curves. Entire squadrons collapsed into themselves, vanishing in bursts of silent destruction. The alien students gasped. Some covered their faces. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The professor's voice trembled. "That is a singularity weapon. Not even the oldest empires dared to touch such power. But humanity had not only touched it, humanity had mastered it." The footage shifted to the ground war. Alien armies spread across the planet's surface, endless in number, crushing cities under their march. Human soldiers stood in dark lines, their weapons heavy, their faces grim. One human officer raised a strange cannon, long and covered in glowing wires. When it fired, no sound came, only a wave. The alien army froze. Their eyes flickered. Then, in horror, they turned on one another. Soldiers screamed, firing wildly at their own allies. Whole legions tore themselves apart as humans advanced. With calm, ruthless steps, the alien students in the hall recoiled, their bodies stiff with fear. The quiet alien student in the back whispered, "The control weapon, they actually used it." The screen jumped again. This time, it showed the skies. Enemy fleets regrouped, still vast, still strong. They fired on humanity's ships with all their fury. For a moment, the humans seemed overwhelmed. Then a massive human dreadnought opened its core. Inside, something pulsed, a weapon hidden since ancient wars. It fired. No explosion, no light. Only silence. And then, the enemy fleet fell still. Their engines died, their weapons shut down. Their ships drifted powerless, caught in space like insects in amber. The professor whispered, unable to believe his own words. They created a weapon to kill energy itself. The alien student stared, breathless. Humanity had broken its own bands, and with every forbidden weapon unleashed, they rewrote the laws of war. The footage zoomed in on the human commander. Smoke and fire lit the space behind him, but his eyes were calm, almost sorrowful. His words echoed across the hall. "We do not use these because we can. We use them only because the galaxy forced us. Remember this, Maya, we banned them for your sake, not ours." The alien students shivered. The meaning was clear. Humanity did not ban weapons to protect themselves. They banned them to protect everyone else. On the screen, the battle reached its climax. Humanity, now unchained, unleashed its full storm. Gravity weapons crushed fleets into dust. Mind weapons broke entire armies. Siren devices spread across the battlefield, turning the strongest alien soldiers into screaming shells of themselves. And through it all, the humans marched forward. No laughter, no cheers, only silence and steel. The enemy fleet, once countless, was reduced to wreckage. The armies that had promised to erase humanity were nothing but shadows on burning ground. At last, the screen faded to black. The hall was silent. Students sat pale, their bodies shaking. Some looked ill. None dared to speak. Finally, the professor broke the silence. His voice was hollow. This was the war that taught the galaxy. The day humanity broke its ban, the day every species learned why humans are feared, and why they must never ever be pushed too far. The quiet alien in the back leaned forward, his voice steady, carrying more weight than the professor's. This is what happens when you mistake restraint for weakness. Humanity does not hide behind their bans. Humanity hides the galaxy from what they are capable of. The students lowered their heads. Their earlier arrogance was gone forever. The mocking words they had spoken seemed childish now. They understood the truth. The bans were not chains on humanity. They were shields protecting the galaxy from the storm humans kept buried, and that storm, once unleashed, could consume everything. The lecture hall was silent. The screen had gone dark, but the images remained burned into every mind. The collapsing fleets, the screaming armies, the cold faces of human soldiers who had unleashed forbidden power without hesitation. The alien students sat frozen, their bodies stiff, their voices trapped in their throats. None of them dared to laugh, none of them dared to mock. The earlier arrogance had been shattered, replaced by a heavy, suffocating fear. The professor stood at the front of the hall, his claws resting weakly on the desk, his ridged head bowed low. He looked older, smaller, as if the footage had drained the strength from him. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, almost broken. You came into this hall believing humanity was weak. You believed their bans were signs of fear, signs of cowardice. You saw them as a lesser species, unworthy of their place among the council. And yet, what you have just witnessed is the truth. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. Every student's gaze was fixed on him, their faces pale, their breathing shallow. Humanity does not ban weapons because they cannot use them, he continued. They ban them because they can, because they alone carry the discipline to lock away power that could end us all. The words echoed through the silent hall like thunder. The students shifted uneasily. Some lowered their heads, ashamed. Others clenched their claws, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. A few still trembled, unable to forget the screams they had heard from the footage, the way entire armies had fallen in seconds. At the back of the room, the quiet alien student who had warned them earlier leaned forward. His narrow eyes gleamed with a grim kind of satisfaction. I told you, he whispered, his voice carrying across the silence. There is always a reason behind humanity's choices. Their bans are not walls of weakness. They are cages. Cages, holding back the monsters they built with their own hands. No one argued with him this time. The professor nodded slowly, his ridges quivering. That student speaks the truth. Humanity's restraint is not weakness. It is the strongest weapon of all. For what could be more terrifying than a predator who chooses not to kill even though it could destroy everything in its path? The hall remained silent. The professor's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. Remember this lesson. For the rest of your lives, remember what you saw today. Do not mistake silence for peace. Do not mistake restraint for weakness. And never, never mock the bans of humanity. He turned off the console. The giant screen folded back into the wall. The lights brightened slowly, revealing rows of pale faces and wide eyes. The students were no longer arrogant children. They were shaken souls forever marked by what they had seen. For a long time, no one moved. Finally, one alien stood. His voice trembled as he spoke. Professor, what happened to the enemy that forced humanity to break the ban? The professor looked at him, his expression dark. They are gone, he said simply. Every fleet, every soldier, every trace of their empire, erased. Not one survived. Gasps rippled through the hall. The students had expected defeat, perhaps even surrender, but not annihilation. Another student whispered, "Then, humanity won." The professor nodded. His eyes, however, held no pride, only fear. Yes, but victory was not the lesson. The lesson is this: the galaxy exists today only because humanity chained itself again afterward. They swore never to unseal those weapons again, unless forced. A cold chill filled the room. The students realized the truth. Humanity could have ruled the galaxy long ago. They could have crushed every empire, enslaved every race. But they didn't. They chose restraint. They chose control. They chose to live among others, while keeping their monsters buried. The quiet alien at the back rose slowly to his feet. His voice was calm, but each word cut through the hall like a blade. This is why legends of humanity spread across the stars. This is why no empire dares to invade their core worlds. It is not because humans are weak. It is because somewhere, locked away in their vaults, lies the storm they swore never to unleash again. The professor closed his eyes as if in prayer. Class dismissed, but no one moved. The alien students sat in silence, their minds replaying every image, every sound, every word. The mocking laughter they had shared only hours ago now felt like a crime. The arrogance they had carried now felt foolish. Humanity had shown them the truth in the most brutal way possible. The bans were not weakness. They were warning signs. They were reminders that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was not the devices humans had built, but the humans themselves. The hall slowly emptied. Students walked out in silence, their heads low, their eyes haunted. The quiet alien who had spoken the truth was the last to leave. He paused at the door, turning back for one final glance at the empty screen. "Restraint," he whispered. "That is their greatest weapon, and that is why the galaxy should fear them most." Then he stepped into the corridor, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt eternal. And in that silence, the lesson was carved into every soul who had been present, etched in fear, never to be forgotten.